Цієї ночі вони підірвали дамбу Каховської гідроелектростанції. О 2:50 ночі стався цей вибух. Абсолютно свідомий, підготовлений вибух. Вони точно знали, що вони роблять. Уявіть собі, обсяг водосховища, яке тримала ця дамба, одне з найбільших водосховищ України. І зночі триває затоплення районів півдня нашої країни. Щонайменше 100 тисяч людей жили в цих районах до російського вторгнення. Принаймні десятки тисяч досі там. 80 міст і сіл під водою. І вже почалась евакуація. І це лише первинні наслідки. І, на жаль, вже більше року Росія контролює і цю дамбу, і всю Каховську гідроелектростанцію. І підірвати її якось ззовні обстрілами фізично, і це нереально. Вона була замінована саме російськими окупантами і підірвана ними. І це ще раз демонструє, з яким цинізмом Росія ставиться до людей, чию землю захопила. Та що насправді Росія несе Європі і світу. Це найбільша рукотворна екологічна катастрофа в Європі за десятки років. І це найбільш небезпечний терорист у світі.
Russia has continued to wage just a brutal, completely unprovoked war against Ukraine, launching yet more airstrikes and bombarding Ukrainian cities all across the country. In fact, in just this here month of May, Russia's launched 17 different air assaults against Kyiv, harming civilians, devastating civilian areas, hitting civilian infrastructure. Now, in response, the United States is going to continue to support Ukraine, help give them things that they need to better defend themselves. As part of all that effort, we've got an upcoming package here, which will be the 39th drawdown of equipment from the Department of Defense inventories using presidential drawdown authorities. We will use that package that we're announcing today to provide Ukraine with additional munitions for Patriot air defense systems, which Ukraine has been deploying quite effectively, as well as more Avenger air defense systems, Stinger anti-aircraft systems, and ammunition, of course, for the HIMARS, artillery, and anti-armor systems that the United States continues to provide to Ukraine.
It's really hard to see how there could be a strategic benefit for Ukraine. They've cut off the bridge and the road, and they've created a situation for the long term that if Ukraine were to take back territory, that they would have a problem on their hands. For Russia, you can see the immediate benefit in that you're stopping that connection for Ukrainian forces to get across. And also, I would say that if they're not planning on staying there for the long term, for whatever reason, if they think, for example, that they're not going to win this battle, then they would leave Ukraine with this long-term headache. So I can see that there is more advantage to Russia right now for this. And when you think that Russia has moved weaponry and explosives into the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, they clearly are not putting safety of their own personnel as well as the locals as their top priority. We don't know enough about the Ukrainian counteroffensive plans, and nor should we, because clearly a large part of them is the element of surprise. So I don't think this would have come as a great surprise. Disappointment, yes, but not great surprise to Ukraine that Russia did, if Russia did something like this. They will be doing other similar things as well. And I would say as well that Russia has now in this war committed a large number of attacks against critical infrastructure. Therefore, this seems to be part of a pattern. Obviously, the most important thing right now is the flooding of the area downstream. And the imminent threat to life and limb for the people living in that area. and that is being dealt with through evacuation processes. There's a longer term issue, which is not that long term in terms of water provision to the region. And in the even longer term than that, there is a water provision to the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. I should also say that there is a hydroelectric plant at the reservoir, which of course is not operational now. The most important thing that Zaporizhia has been under constant threat is that it requires a power supply to keep the coolant flowing through the now shutdown reactors. They're in various stages of shutdown, so they're not producing electricity, but the material still heats up a lot and could be dangerous if it's not kept cool. So you need some amount of electricity to be able to pump the water around. So you need water and electricity at any nuclear power station. There are 6 power stations at Zaporizhia. And then, so that's one big worry, and an attack on the power supply. There is no backup external supply anymore. So there's some backup internal supply, but if those are taken down as well, we're into a situation very, very similar to what happened at Fukushima. One of the pieces of critical infrastructure that so far we haven't seen many major attacks succeeding is on communications. So we are likely, I think, as the battle heats up, to start to see attacks on communication infrastructure. We are concerned that that would also include attacks in space. Most likely, they would be attempted cyber attacks in space, which is a common occurrence. Whether they would succeed or not is another thing. We're likely, I think, as well to see increased cyber attacks from both sides. Let's have a look at how that pans out. So far, Ukraine has been extremely successful in fending off cyber attacks. But of course, you know, you're only as good as your last defense. So let's see what happens. But the cyber component, the communications component has been a bit of a missing element so far. We are likely as well, I think, to see more threats of the use of nuclear weapons, just to be aware. And, you know, as I understand it, NATO countries, particularly United States, France and UK, that are nuclear weapons possessors, take these threats seriously, but also are very cautious in the way they respond to them, so that they are not used in order to gain any upper hand from Russia, which is Russia's intent in issuing such threats.
Наша Антонівка, так у нас горбиста, можна сказати, ну не горбиска, у нас.
Antonivka is in a hilly area. My house is in an elevated position. Further down towards the city is a ravine which is completely flooded. It is impossible to drive through there. People are trapped in what became an island. I was taken away by my friends. I had to leave because having spent 3 nights in a bomb shelter, I just cannot take any more.
Все, я їду, я не можу вже. Головна річка.
This main river of Ukraine has water reservoir after reservoir. The Kakhovka reservoir is the biggest of them. It will take forever to empty all the water, and of course, the left bank will be flooded.
Лівий берег весь буде затоплений. До зубів. І на мене. Зірка приїхала до вас. Стрічка, да. Це я. Зірка приїхала до вас Антонівська. Вибралася.
Кожен день згадували.
When she was under occupation, we were worrying so much until we managed to establish phone contact. We were so worried, very worried, because these Russians were there. We finally met, but under very sad circumstances.
Бачили, і опять за таких обставин, що така ситуація, це дуже.
Це 3 дні останнім часом, 3 дні. А до цього було так, знаєте, трошки тихо.
The last 3 days were the worst. Until then, it was more or less quiet. Everybody relaxed a bit, but the past 3 days were terrifying. There were drones flying, explosives thrown nearby, artillery shelling.
І ці з мінометів били. Як ми по телефону друг друга підтримували. Каже, ми теж сидимо в підвалі.